Hi there. So hopefully you've knitted all the pieces for the Knitted Santa. At the end of the process, we should hopefully have something that looks something like this. So I'm going to show you now how we get to this from all these pieces. Now you should have something that looks a bit like all the pieces that I've got in front of me here. This is the coat, this is the body, this is the hat, this is the beard, and this is the belt. Also, some tools that you'll need, some toy making tweezers. So these are the ones with like the paddle sort of shape at the bottom there. That just makes handling stuffing a bit easier. I like some embroidery scissors because these threads are quite fine, and it's just easier to cut and be a bit more precise. I have a latchet tool. Now, because these are quite small, I actually use quite a small latchet tool, and I think actually I got this from Clover, but this is just the handle, and I actually used the needle from an E8000, so a fine gauge machine, to have an extra fine. You can use the bigger, standard gauge latchet tools, but if you can get a smaller one, that is much better. A size 18 tapestry needle with the large head. I use a pom-pom maker from Clover. I'm not advertising for them, I just use these and they're very, very good. And this is the smallest size. I think it says it on here somewhere. Yes, this is a 20mm pom-pom maker. And this is a buckle. I will be linking in the pattern and on the comments for the videos how to where to buy these in the UK, and I'll also link the size, so if you're in another country, you can look for these with your own local suppliers. And you'll also need a 6mm double-sided satin ribbon, and that's cut to 17cm. But if you like your loop to be a bit longer or shorter, obviously just cut it to the length you prefer. But this goes over normal Christmas tree branch. If you've got really thick branches, you might want to adapt to that. Okay, so let's begin. So we're just going to be working on the body. So, sorry, I neglected to say that we also need some stuffing. So I've cut all these lengths to more reasonable amounts, but I always get scared cutting too early, so sometimes these lengths are a bit long, just because I know if I cut them, I'll cut the wrong one too short, and then it's too late to sort it out. And I'll be sewing all these by hand in the videos, but I do use a linker for the coat when I do it myself. But because I know not all of you will have a linker, I will just demonstrate it by hand. Okay. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to thread up the weaving thread. So that's the thread that gathers this at the bottom for the boots. Let's get all those threads out of the way. And I'm just literally going to take that edge into the opposite edge. The very bottom, and pull it through and gather that as much as I can. Don't pull too tight because this is very delicate and you will break it. I've realised now that I don't actually need these threads. Now you don't have to sew these in because you can just embed them inside the Santa. So I'm just going to cut them a couple of inches long. And to make this easy on myself, I'm just going to get some pins. And just match all the colour changes, so we're sewing this up evenly. Again, I'm not going to need these, so I'm just going to cut them off a couple of inches. So I like to use backstitch for making these up, but it's up to you. You can use overstitch as well, but so I just going forward like a slight amount and then back through the middle, so half the distance that we've just gone, and again forward twice the amount, then back. There'll be many backstitch videos on YouTube, so do look that up if you're getting a bit confused now. And I'm literally just doing this to the edge of the white. It's no point changing to white thread for this. Just take that needle out once we get there. And then just when we get to that edge, I just go around the whole edge a couple of times to cure it. Then just take your embroidery scissors and cut a couple of inches. And now we're going to thread up the red. And that's just the end of that red from when we started knitting in red. And again, I'm using backstitch. Again, just cut that a couple of inches. And I've just realised I have screwed this up because I cut that length of flesh here when I was supposed to pick up and sew that, so I do apologise that. I will put a comment on the overlay in the video so you don't make that mistake while you're making it up. So I'm just going to cut a small length of flesh just to sew that up. So if you do make mistakes cutting threads, it's not the end of the world, just get another thread. I always sew up with 2 strands like I've knitted. Just literally going to go over that a couple of times. To secure it. Okay. Again, carry on back stitching right to the top. Okay. So we just got to the top here. Right. Secure that thread, and again we can just cut off a couple of inches. Now we are going to turn the whole thing inside out. Okay. make sure that thread is tucked on the inside there, and now we're going to stuff it. So literally you can stuff this by hand. Try not to get clumps of stuff in because it will be unevenly stuffed, so just like separate it as you, just before you put it in. It wants to be quite firmly stuffed, but not so firm, as I always say when I'm making these up, that you can see the stuffing through the stitches, but I think that's about fine. You should be able to see stuffing right towards the top there. And you just pull this tight. Yeah, and that looks just about right. You just might want to manipulate it a little. And then we're just going to thread this, which is the bind and tie thread, the one you took through the open stitches when you took it off the machine. And we just literally pulled that tight and just kind of thread it through the opposite end, and then literally I just go across this hole and then across the opposite side. Now don't worry if there's a tiny hole here, it doesn't matter, because it's going to be covered by the hat. Okay, and now once that's secure, I go down through the top of the head and out through this like kind of section that where the two colours meet at the back. Okay, now I wrap, this is where you gather for the head, so I wrap it around the head, the neck edge, and just do that a few times until you've got the kind of neck shape that you want. Okay, and then I just go to the back seam again and I literally stitch under a few stitches under that back seam to secure it, to stop it from unravelling. You've got plenty of thread here if you've cut a good decent length, so it shouldn't go anywhere. And then literally take your needle inside, go a decent way and just come out again somewhere else. Take it out and then just pull it slightly and snip and it will disappear inside. Okay, so there, that's the body done. So we're just going to put that to one side for now, and we're just going to go on and do the coat section. Okay, so the coat has loads of ends and it is a right pain. Managing all these ends is a bit of the bane of my life, particularly when I was making all these up. So the first thing we want to do is get rid of these ones because we don't need them once we've cast this off, so I'll show you how to do that now. So I take my latchet tool. Now we also need a bit of red thread because when we cast these off on the machine, they didn't, so I cast these, they wouldn't have had, because we were continuously doing it with holding position, we don't actually have an extra any thread to use, so just a very small amount, just about 6 inches or so, and then we're just going to go into the very first stitch of red on this neck edge, so just where the waist yarn is, you can see it quite clearly, and take that behind the latch, and then sometimes I find it easier to hook it, hook the red, and then you just pull. Actually, sorry, I just got a bit of white there, just a second. This is very fiddly. These stitches, this is latching these off is the only fiddly thing in this pattern, fortunately. So got it. So again, just drag that stitch through the first, and then pick up the next one, and again through, off, and then through the next one, and through, and off. Now this last stitch is incredibly difficult to find, but it is there, I assure you. So just try and pull that waist, and you can just see it there, very small. Try and there we go, I've got it. And pull through, and that's the last stitch, okay? So what I do now is I just take this, the thread I just cut, and I just bring that through and hold one end. That's it. And then I literally just tie that thread a couple of times to secure it. Okay. Now I just unravel this waist yarn. Well, like I said, sometimes the waist doesn't always come off completely fine, but there you go. I'll just get rid of that. And then when you've cast off this edge, you just want to look to make sure there's no rogue stitches that you've not latched off properly, and thankfully I can't see any. And that you can sew the ends in if you want to, but I usually just again, like I've done for a lot of these, I've double knotted it so it's secure. So cut a couple of inch length and just tuck it onto the inside there. Okay. Well, first thing we want to do is sew these side seams. So you can see it's a symmetrical pattern. So I'm just going to fold this over this way, like that, and I'm going to start pinning it. So the way this pattern works is these edges roll to create that those lovely hems. So you want to really roll them and then pin them. It's much easier with the linker. So again, the same with this one. Just roll them and pin them. And then we're just going to put them against each other like that. Just take one pin out and then the other, and then again just pin through them both. Okay, like that. Then we're just going to get the sleeve or the arm and pin that. And you want to pin so you know where that corner of that arm is, just for when you're making it up. Okay. So I'm just going to get my needle and thread up that white from the hem. Yeah, you want it so both those colour changes are together. So I'm just going to thread to the end of that hem, and I'm back stitching this because I'm going through quite a few different layers, so it's hard to overstitch this. Okay, so I can't overstitch this because it's the stitches won't be secure enough, so I'm just back stitching it. To be honest, I favour back stitch throughout this pattern. Okay, when we get to the end of the white, again, just over sew. Now I will sew this ending because we've got so many ends in this bit. Like I said, if you want to sew ends in rather than leave them open to tuck in later like I do for some of the bits, feel free. It's personal preference. Okay. Okay, so I need an extra bit of red for this section, unfortunately. I just cut a bit of a length. Remember, backstitch uses quite a bit of yarn. Again, using the same yarn, 2 strands of the red that I was using, and just over sew a couple of times to secure it. And we're just going to backstitch up this edge. Okay, so just again going over that twice. And because I've just got so many threads in this, I'm just going to sew it in again. Linker, you can actually sew stitches in quite easily, but I'll show you that when I do that video. Okay, so I've done one side, so now I'm just going to do the other side exactly the same. Okay, and then just go over that last bit a few times. And again, I'll just sew along this seam to sew that edge in. Okay, now the only threads should be those attached to the hands and the sleeve cuffs. So what I'm going to do now is turn it inside out. It should look a bit like this at this stage. Okay. Now I usually find I have to use my tweezers to push the cuffs out. There we go. So just push them all out, including the hands, and just pull those threads all the way through. Then do the same with the opposite side. So it should look a little bit like this. Now first thing I do is the threads that are here, so just attached to the bottom of the hand and the cuff, we're not going to need, so I just chop them off to a couple of inches and they will get tucked inside. So just get your tweezers and just tuck them to the inside of the arm. Now this is the flesh yarn attached to the top of the hand, so I pull that nice and tight and just go through the very top stitches of both, and you can see that's pulled, and then I literally just overstitch that hand. I prefer doing it this way than wrong side facing because it is just an absolute nightmare turning these inside right side out afterwards, so I tend to do it this way. Okay, so that's that hand pretty much sewn up. Okay, make sure try and make sure there's not a hole at that bottom edge. Sew in an extra stitch if you have to, and then literally just embed that end inside the arm. Okay. Now I tend to get a bit of stuffing at this stage and stuff the hand and the arm, so don't go overboard to begin with. So just get a little bit, literally a finger of thumb worth of stuffing, and just move that in towards the inside of that arm, and then just sneak that up just to the inside of the hand so you can stuff it. You see that hand is nicely stuffed now. And then you can do this now or you can do it later, but we tend to stuff the rest of the arm, and you just want it so the stuffing is literally just going up to that edge where it meets the body. Okay. Now, this is where we do the same as we've done for the base of the coat, and we're just like literally curling that cuff round. And this is why you'll see I did the loose stitches towards the end of the cuff pattern, because we're literally going to go from here to here, so we're going as tight as we can and back again. Literally an overstitch. Now it doesn't look right, but it does work. And then just go one over again, just that very outer layer. It will be tight. That's it. And the next stitch. And then the final one. Maybe just go through that one once again. Let's bring it in a little bit more. This is tight, but it does work. Sometimes you can pull that hand out a little bit and just pull that cuff back once it's sewn up. And sometimes I go to the back to the top and just get that edge and just do another stitch. So neaten that up, that's it. And then just go underneath and back through the arm. Now we're just going to do exactly the same as we've done here on the opposite side.